Hi people. So this one's a little bit spontaneous, but I thought, what the hell? There might come a time when YouTube will just totally go censorious and take down all videos like the one I'm about to make here. Um, but it's something I sincerely believe, and I think it needs to be said. I want to talk about woke mentality as I see it. This is something I've definitely spoken about before, but what I'm going to do at some point, I keep mentioning this, I keep meaning to get around to it, is have a big review of all my videos. I've got many, 3,500, um, and maybe edit some that are repetitive or whatever. But anyway, I've just been looking at a David Bowie song from the 80s. I don't know exactly what year, I think it's mid 80s. It's called China Girl. You might be familiar with the song if you know David Bowie. Um, and I noticed that I commented on that when I was in China 3 years ago. I had a VPN out there so I could have access to YouTube. Anyway, basically, if you haven't seen the video, spoiler here, it depicts a kind of relationship between Bowie and a Chinese girl. Actually, she was played by a woman who was of Vietnamese Australian background, as I understand it. But basically, Bowie is having this kind of flirtatious relationship with her, and apparently was made as an anti-racism video because it sort of intersperses them flirting and also kind of questionable scenes of racism. It's a little bit strange. It's certainly an unusual video. At one point, for example, Bowie is dressed in this kind of Victorian outfit. He looks like a Victorian gentleman, and she's kind of on her knees, and it's a desert, and it looks like I don't know, colonial subjugation or something like that. It's a strange video. Of course, Bowie was an eccentric, so there's a lot of ways to interpret that. But there's another scene where he's kind of running down the street somewhere in Asia, or maybe it's a Chinatown somewhere, and she's dressed in what looks to me like a traditional Miao outfit, which is an ethnic group in southern China. Um, and she has his rice bowl and he kind of throws it in the air. Then they start kissing. It's a very strange video, but I think it's very obvious that the message is anti-racist. Um, there's one bit where in this flirtation he kind of, well, rather she imitates his Western nose, then he imitates, wait for this, her Oriental eyes. Now it goes without saying that today that would unquestionably be cancelled. Um, if Bowie was still around, he would be forced to make an apology, or the video would have to be changed or something. And a lot of people were kind of observing this on the video, myself included. But that's just one example. There's so many things from popular culture, even up until the 1990s, maybe even up until the 2000s. I mean, look at Little Britain, that would just be not allowed today. And to me, this is kind of representative of the rise of woke intolerance. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that everything should be stuck in time. I'm not saying that something should naturally progress and change. I definitely see, for example, the need for certain words to be discarded that are glaringly offensive, and for things to move on. So, as an example, if we look at Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's, he infamously done Yellowface, so he was a Japanese character, and it was looking back on it. I've no doubt that Mickey Rooney had no bad intentions. He was just an actor doing his job. But I can see why that would be seen as offensive. It was a bit crude, a bit certainly imitated what you would see in the World War II propaganda art of the Japanese. That film was made in 1961, 60 years ago. So I can understand why something like that is sort of consigned to the past. And looking at the old Bond films, some of the lines that Sean Connery's Bond comes out with are blatantly sexist. No way around it. Now, Fleming wrote Bond as a bit of a misogynist, or rather a bit of um, a player in that sense. So he was never meant to be particularly respectful of women, but he was the protagonist. So anyway, I can see the need for something to move on. Even I, as a Bond fan, look at some of those old Bond films and think, well, that line's a bit stuffy, a bit. It's definitely, I can see why some things have to move on. But what I really, really, really dislike about woke ideology, and I'm giving it that title because it's something they coined themselves. If they want to see it as a pejorative, they're the ones that have said that they are awoken, because this is actually an adoption of something that came about in the late 60s and 70s with the Black Power movement, i.e., to be awoken to injustice. And it's kind of re-emerged from roughly the late 2010s onwards, um, to be woke. So today, when we hear the term, it's often in the context, I should say, of criticism. And I think that criticism is well deserved. Because if you look at the way that these self described woke activists behave, it's just so obnoxious. It's not about progress, it's not about tolerance. It's got a lot more to do with control, language policing, um, and intolerance, I would suggest. Bullying as well. Um, I just think there's something very Orwellian, almost cult like, when you get a situation. I've mentioned this a few times before, like at the University of Sheffield, where because there was reports of racist bullying going on, the university's response to that was to pay students to monitor their peers for microaggressions. Now, this is an example of a problem being dealt with in totally the wrong way. What should have happened is the students who were engaging in racist bullying should have been reprimanded or suspended, depending on the gravity of the offence. I've always said bullying needs to be tackled. But instead, the University of Sheffield, by the way, the same university shamefully panders to the Chinese state and takes money from Beijing and fails to act against Chinese students bullying their Hong Kong peers. I don't have a good impression from the University of Sheffield's management of these issues. But anyway, paying students to monitor for microaggressions is sinister because where you have a financial incentive that's going to be abused, or it's very rife to be abused. But how do they consider microaggressions? Well, asking someone at a party where they're from, if that person's not white, then that would be considered a microaggression because, oh, you're saying we're an other. Well, so much of this is common sense, and this is the thing about woke ideology. It throws common sense out the window. So common sense would be, if you're asking in a hostile way, like, "Oh, you're not one of us," well, obviously that's hostile. But if someone is simply making conversation, like, "Oh, I've come from my home city to study here. Where are you from?" As a matter of conversation, or another example they cited was saying that not everything is racist. Actually saying that is considered a microaggression. This insufferable left wing shackling control that we're seeing in universities, I think a lot of it comes from the American left. Some of it from the British left. A lot of this is imported from the American left. When you look at academics like Robin DiAngelo, who push critical race theory, she's the author of White Fragility, among other such classics. Um, it's really sad because I'm not talking about fringe figures here. Robin DiAngelo is a bestseller. And how does she use her platform? To just stoke up animosity and division and contempt among people. I think it's despicable. I think it's absolutely despicable. I also think the way that powerful networks like CNN, and people might think I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think it's related. The way CNN covers racial issues, again, it's just very, very inflammatory. I'm not saying they shouldn't cover those issues at all, but it's the way they cover them. Selective outrage. CNN will home in on a white celebrity making a racist comment, but when a senior member of Black Lives Matter makes a racist comment, they ignore it. This selective outrage and double standard is so, so glaringly obvious. And I think it's despicable the way powerful networks do that. Utterly despicable. Um, but the thing about, I would compare woke ideology to the Red Scare in the 50s, except this time it's in reverse. The Red Scare was exaggerated paranoia about communism. Now, it wasn't totally without basis. There was communist activity in the United States in the 50s, but of course it went too far, and a lot of innocent people were unfairly smeared as communists and traitors. And McCarthy went too far, I think. But we're seeing now the reverse, which is almost a Western form of the Cultural Revolution. It's not that bad. I don't want to make a direct comparison because we're not seeing people being beaten to death. But what we are seeing is careers destroyed. We are seeing people vilified. We are seeing a mob mentality in some cases. So I do see it as a sort of Western cultural revolution. And there needs to be a pushback against it. I am so sick and tired of these far left ideologues, and they're not necessarily far left in the traditional Marxist Leninist sense. They're more the children of those people. I mean, actually, it's that baby boomer generation of hard leftists who have influenced this stuff. I mean, Robin DiAngelo was a baby boomer. So it's her generation of hard leftists who are polluting the minds of young people with this poisonous, divisive ideology, masquerading as progress. That's one of the things I find most despicable about it. That they will typically say, oh, but it's just about equality. Oh, it's just about standing against racism. Oh, it's just about standing against sexism. And it's actually very clever, it's very manipulative, because by saying that, they can just hide behind it. And who's going to argue against standing against racism or sexism or homophobia or any other form of bigotry? So by positioning themselves in that way, it's actually very clever. It's very manipulative, but it's very clever. But when you scratch beneath the surface, you'll see that actually someone who is using a racist term like white privilege whilst claiming to be an anti-racist activist, or they talk about mansplaining and they talk about, you know, tearing down the patriarchy, yet they ignore issues that disproportionately impact men. How can they say that they are anti-sexist? Or, people who pretend to be LGBT activists, um, or rather, they say they're on the progressive side of the left, but they have no problem with the hounding of J.K. Rowling because she and other women insist that biology matters. I just think that, in the West, we really, really, really value freedom of expression. But when some of this stuff is getting turned into legislation, that is very disturbing. Merseyside police not long ago had a banner saying, this isn't verbatim, but it was something to the effect of um, being offensive is a criminal offence. Or, yeah, it was something along those lines. Being insulting is a criminal offence. And they were absolutely, the pushback was intense, as it should have been, because that was a clear abuse of power, and they ended up apologising. But what people pointed out was this is Orwellian. This is effectively saying, well, who gets to determine what is offensive? I am very, very wary of any laws that are supposedly designed to stop hate crime but are actually controlling language. I mean, quite frankly, if you're dealing with a troll online, block them. Just block them. Or, fight back. Tell them they're a horrible person. If that doesn't work, block them. Facebook has blocking tools. But I think this tendency to go to the police, and the police to spend time on policing, for example, someone who's used the wrong pronoun, rather than tackling violent thugs, um, the priority issue is definitely very concerning. Um, what I find so sad about this and so frustrating is people like myself who speak out against it. Woke ideologues then pigeonhole us. Oh, you're a right winger. Oh, you must be a misogynist because you're critical of feminism. Well, I'm critical of third wave feminism. It gets into this mentality that unless you 100% support a certain movement, then you must be the enemy. What's interesting is this is largely a Western phenomenon. So, for example, people who might be, let's say, third generation immigrants, Asian Americans, those young people are likely to endorse this Western leftist narrative about things like cultural appropriation. Yet, actual Chinese and Japanese people won't care. This so-called, that's a good example actually of this woke language, these woke language games. Cultural appropriation. According to wokes, that's basically appreciating another culture. Yet if you don't appreciate another culture, you're just a redneck or, in this context, a little Englander. So you can't win with them. You can't win because they thrive on offense. They thrive on looking for reason to be offended. So as an example, a few years ago, there was a young American woman, white woman, who, for her prom, decided to wear a Chinese sheep hat because she thought it was elegant and attractive, which it is. Um, she was immediately attacked for cultural appropriation. Now, she wasn't claiming to be Chinese. She simply liked the design, I assume, and she wanted it for her prom. What's interesting is the people who were attacking her were Asian Americans, and no doubt they're left-wing white allies. But if you showed that in China, the Chinese would probably say, "Oh, that's great. The Westerners are appreciating our culture." That's the ironic thing. This is largely a Western phenomenon. I'm not saying that Asian countries don't have the sort of social disputes. In fact, I was speaking to my colleague over there about some of these issues. I was speaking to her about feminism, and I was saying that for some Western men like me, we dislike some of the excesses of third wave feminism. And she said that in China that is also increasing as well. I have to say, I didn't see it. And the example she cited seemed really, really moderate compared to the sort of things that goes on in the West in terms of man shaming. But then again, China is a huge country of 1.4 billion people, so there will be a lot of social phenomena going on. Same in other Asian countries. Um, right, I'll wrap this up because I'll just end up repeating myself. But I bought Douglas Murray's The Madness of Crowds earlier this year, and I look forward to reading it. I think he's definitely worth time, in terms of what he has to say about these things. Um, and he touches on everything. He touches on the gay issue. He touches on the trans issue, on women, on race, all the hot button topics. I'll just conclude with this. We need to be open minded enough to consider that people can believe in progressive causes without having to tag themselves with a particular ideology. For example, I'll just close with this final example. This idea that the only way you can stand against racism is by taking the knee, and if you're critical of taking the knee, you must therefore be in favor of racism is utterly absurd. One of my issue with taking the knee is that A, it's closely associated with Black Lives Matter. I know its origins are much earlier, but today it is largely associated with that. And BLM is a very, controversial organization for good reason. A second issue is I just don't think it works as a measure to combat racism because I don't think racists will look at taking the knee and think, oh, I better reform my ways. I better become more open minded. I think it's better to target racists, where you have clear examples, for example, of footballers or other athletes being abused by racists and target them. Charge them with public affray or harassment or racial aggravation, whatever it might be, but target that directly. I just think that this forced conformity is cult like. If athletes want to take the knee, okay. But what I find a little bit I mean, I was watching the BBC earlier, some Olympic coverage. I think it was women's volleyball or women's I forget which sport it was, but both the German and England teams took the knee, and the BBC was praising it. Well, that's up to them, but my question is, what if you have one of those players who's not comfortable doing with it? Will they have that choice? Because that's what you get with forced conformity. Anyway, thanks for watching.